So now we're going to have a look at the performers, of which we have 3. Now you can think of these as being customizable LFOs, essentially, where you can draw in your own shapes. Now we had these in Massive 1, and at the time I think they were really groundbreaking and were really a feature that people came to know and love and use a lot. And they've really been taken to the next level in Massive X. So the performers allow us to create complex modulation, and we can of course route them to multiple parameters at the same time. Now it doesn't become active until it's actually taken and applied to a parameter. So you see, as soon as I put it on the filter cutoff there, it's now become active. Let's give it some amount. Now the first thing to say is these can work in a unipolar direction, i.e. from whatever the basic level of the parameter is, upwards, i.e. positively, or they can work in a bipolar nature, which means they're working either side of that point. So you can see that as I press uni and bi, we get this grey line when it's bipolar, showing that it's going either side, and also we get a change down here to show that it's moving either side of a central point. I'll leave it on unipolar. So also just some ways in which we interact with this. We have a scroll bar here to allow us to kind of zoom in and out by clicking and dragging. And we can also determine the length that we're working with using this bar here. So it's a good idea to determine the length and then zoom in so you can see what you're doing properly. I'm just going to do a 2-bar length so we can actually work in a quite simple, small way. So what we have done here is painting tools that allow us to draw in different shapes. And what we can also do is determine the kind of time division we're working with. And we do that using this area here. So there's 2 different ways we can do it. We can use the basic setting or custom. Now basic is going to work using musical time divisions and note values. So we go from a quarter note up to a 30-second note, and we have triplets on top of that as well. And we can work with different time signatures. The majority of people are going to be working with 4/4, so I'll leave it on that. So you can see as I press these note values, you can see that these divisions change to give you more resolution essentially. But let's put it on a quarter note so we can work really simply, so I can show how this works. Now the custom option, this allows you to create your own complex time signatures. You can set number of beats, beat length, and subdivisions here. I'm going to put it back to basic and we're going to work with that. Okay, so as I said, we're on a quarter note. Now we have painting tools down here, and this is where we're able to actually put in the complex modulation pattern that we want. Now with this first tool here, we can just click and add in points. And wherever we click, it's going to snap to the nearest line, essentially. So now if I press a note, you can hear we've got that modulation going on. Now one thing I should say as well is that underneath here we have these selections. These are called selection zones. And we can actually do things within here as well. So if I double click, I can actually delete a section. If I rest in here and click and drag, I can move a section. And if I hold down Control or right click as I do that, I can actually move that section using a more of a finer control so it doesn't snap to the grid. Okay, now whenever we're working with the performer and we want to reinitialize it essentially, we can do that from here. And we can do it either as a bipolar modulator or unipolar. So I'm going to initialize unipolar and go back to an empty performer. Okay, so let's have a look at some of our other painting tools. Now this one is going to allow us to create lines within here. I'm just going to bring down the filter cutoff so it's really pronounced. Bring up the amount and also bring in some resonance so it's even going to bring that out further. So that's the line tool. Let's reinitialize again. The next one we have is a step which creates a static value for that grid. Okay. Next up, we have this ramp down, which is going to create a ramp down for that grid. That's kind of more like we had for the original massive performer. And then we have a ramp up, the opposite. Pretty cool. Then we have triangle. And finally, a sine. Put a couple of these in. Now you may have noticed that I actually just inadvertently bent one of the lines by accident when I was trying to click in there. And I did that because I actually clicked too close to the line. And when we go on the line, we can drag up and down and we can create bends to the line. You can see how I'm doing that here, which is pretty cool. Okay, so two controls over here. We have a level control. Now this is kind of a global amount for the performer. So it's essentially affecting how much we're going to affect the parameter it's routed to. And then finally, we have this rate control here. Now this goes up to 8 times the BPM of our DAW. So I'm working at 120. So this is going to make the performer 8 times 120 in terms of BPM. So it's essentially the speed at which it's going to work. But it's working as a division of our DAW tempo, so it stays in time. Now the other direction to the left is going to be 8 times slower. Okay, and reset that. So working with these basic values, we can actually decide to work with quarter notes as our main pattern, and then we could throw in some eighth notes. So let's do that. So I'll just put in a couple of parts here, and then, okay, let's try some 16th notes here. Let's even try some 30-second notes here. So we can mix and match these values to create different grooves. So far we've been looking at the horizontal grid tab. If I click on this button here, we move across to the vertical grid. Now this is where we can set how many divisions there are vertically. So let's reinitialize this. And you can see now we've got 24 divisions. Now if I route this performer to our pitch, and I'll set the amount as being 2 octaves. I'm going to take off this filter assignment here, bring the filter all the way up. This now means, if I use my step value, that we can actually create patterns using semitone values, because there's 24 semitones in 2 octaves. 24 semitones is the amount of modulation I have, and the vertical grid is snapping to 24 semitones. So let's actually change to quarter notes to make this a little bit quicker. So we can do some octaves. Let's do some thirds, some fifths, back to an octave. So using that vertical grid value, we're able to make sure that we continue to work with semitone values. And of course, there's nothing stopping us from routing to multiple parameters simultaneously. So there we're working with the pitch and the filter cutoff. Okay, so that's part one of our look at the performers. In the next video, we're going to carry on looking at these, and we're also going to have a look at the remote octave, which enables you to play back different performer patterns using a MIDI keyboard. Thanks for watching.